Now that we've talked about what a segment is, and a segment refers to kind of the length of something. That's an oversimplification. Again, you have the length of a segment, but it's referring to, lines and just a piece of a line. We need to now talk about angles. Well, what angles kind of tell us about is directions. So let's think of an example where we've heard of directions. And if you've taken a geography class or you've looked at a map, you know about an absolute set of directions: north, south, east, and west. Never eat soggy waffles. Now, why is this absolute direction? Well, it's because no matter which way you're facing, north is always north. So based off that, what we can do is we can now give directions that say something like face north and then go 30 degrees to the east. And so what this is basically doing is it's setting north as our 0 degrees and saying go 30 degrees in the eastward direction, and that's the direction that you want. So this angle right here would be 30 degrees. Now we could do the same thing, but instead set our 0 degrees to be south, and we could go maybe, let's say, 45 degrees in the westward direction. And so we would set this to be 0 degrees, which means that this is kind of our first side, and I didn't mark that for the previous ones. Let me add that in. Angles always have two sides, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then rotate 45 degrees in the westward direction. And so that would be our angle. So let's look at some of the characteristics of this. Every angle is going to have two sides to it, and those sides tend to be raised because I could extend this direction out, both of these, as far as I want, and that won't change this angle here, the number of degrees I rotated. And so the initial side here, the 0 degree side, where we started from, is called that, the initial side. Now, a lot of this isn't that important when we're talking about geometry, but it's good to know the terminology. And this would be the terminal side, which is where you end, you terminate there. Same would be true on the bottom here, so I'll fill that in as well. So what did we learn about angles? Well, one thing we learned is that they have two sides. That's good. We can see here that the measurement that we use for them is degrees. All right, so we're kind of piecing these things together. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about was, in general, we're not going to talk about these things in like north, south, east, and west, or we're not going to do that all the time. So let's look at a geometric way of describing an angle. So there's a few ways of naming an angle, but let's take another angle here. Notice that I have two sides. They're going to originate from a specific point here. That point has a name, and that name is the vertex. And that is something you're going to really want to notate. We'll refer to that a lot. That's the vertex. And let's go ahead and call that A. In some examples, it's enough to just call this angle right here. We can just call that angle A. However, there can be an issue with that. So let's say that there is also another ray that comes from here. Look at that for a second, and you can pause it. How many different angles could be angle A? Well, I'm hoping that you said 3. So we have that original angle there that's in orange, or we could have this angle right here that also originates from A, or we could have the angle that goes all the way from the outside ray to the other outside ray. So we need a better way of naming this. So I'm going to come back to just my original rays here, this one and this one here. And what we're going to need is we're going to need to add some points. Now we can add these points and we can call them whatever we want. It's entirely up to us. But I'm going to go ahead and call this one here B, and I'll call this C. Pretty creative naming convention there, right? And so this orange angle, this one right here, what we're going to do is we're going to start at one of these ends here, doesn't matter which one, and we're going to go B, So if we start at point B and then travel along until we hit the vertex A, and then travel along, and then we get to C. And you'll see that that path I just followed actually forms the angle. Now, there is another way we could write it. We could start at C, travel to A, and then go to B as well. All of these name this same angle, and I'll go ahead and another way of doing it is to give it a number just on the interior of the angle there. Okay, and this is all of these are angle 1. So in doing this, angle 1 is sometimes written by students incorrectly as angle A, B, C. Now remember, these are directions. So it's telling me start here at A, travel up to B, and then travel to C. So it's actually describing this angle right here, which is not the angle I wanted to describe. So this would be incorrect. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and let's hide that particular piece. So in this, we described what an angle is. It's describing the directions that we can be going. There is an initial and a terminal side. So there's two sides, and it is described in degrees. And then I went through the naming conventions right here. And there are 3 different ways to name it. Now, the one thing I forgot to point out is when you're naming it with the 3 letters, the middle is always going to be the vertex. And that's what saves you from doing the other kind of incorrect example that I did before. So if you think of these as directions, it should be pretty much a piece of cake.